How you doing? Today we're going to be ranking all the Five Nights at Freddy's games based off of how terrifying they are. Now, the FNAF games are known for the horror and the jump scares and all that showbiz, but there's a lot more depth to the horror and the atmosphere of these games that a lot of people seem to go over because of how popular our franchise has become. When something becomes popular in the mainstream, it's kind of sometimes taken out of proportion, or it's utilized in such a vast way that it just kind of diminishes the horror of the franchise. And so today I wanted to go over how I would rank the Five Nights at Freddy's games based off of a horror spectrum. And I'm going to be doing multiple lists of ranking the FNAF games. I did one way back when using Michael Rosen memes, but today, I'm actually going to be here in person saying the reasons as to why I have certain FNAF games at a certain placement. Before we start, actually, I want to mention Help Wanted is not going to be on this list because it feels a little unfair. It's a VR game, so obviously it's going to have the leverage point in that regard. So I'm going to leave it out of the list. I'm also going to leave out all the spin-offs, all the RPG stuff, and Special Delivery, because Special Delivery can go fuck itself. It's a terrible, shitty game, which you're going to hear me say a couple times. So starting off, bottom of the barrel, the least scariest FNAF game, which is actually kind of surprising that this is the least scariest, and that is going to be Ultimate Custom Night. Now, obviously, Ultimate Custom Night is this very fun, lighthearted, goofy FNAF game that was supposed to make a light of itself. The main problem, however, is that it's a FNAF game, and a FNAF game, despite being fun and lighthearted, if it's structured like a mainline game, which Ultimate Custom Night is, it has to still be scary. This is not a FNAF world, it's not a Freddy in Space 2, hell, this is not even a Special Delivery, and still, it should not feel like it's this goofy. I appreciate that we finally have a chance to be fun and lighthearted with these characters, but the way the story functions and how this story is supposed to come into play with this specific game, it just feels like it diminishes the whole fear factor, because the story is about William Afton being in hell and is going through an endless purgatory, suffering day after day and night after night, constantly from the animatronics, but it doesn't feel like that. It just feels like you're just having a blast, having fun, like this is an enjoyable time, which is a total contradiction to the story overall, which ranking the story is going to be another one of the ranking lists, so you're going to see that same complaint kind of there. But overall, in this game, I don't really think you have any character that is genuinely scary or terrifying. I'd say maybe like Scrapyard a little bit, because he just kind of comes out of nowhere banging, flashing the light, but other than that, there is no fear to be had. I mean, there's also the Old Man Consequences thing, but that, that's like an Easter egg that you have to specifically try and get. So even then, it's like there's not really much fear into this game, so it's at the bottom of the barrel. But just above that, because this game is not in the slightest bit terrifying, Security Breach. I have a lot of problems with this game. You're going to hear it throughout all these rankings. But the main problem is this belief of FNAF being a family-friendly horror game. Now, I don't know about you, but family-friendly horror game does not work as a cohesive sentence. Family-friendly horror is not something that should be one and the same, because horror in no way, shape, and form can ever be family-friendly. That just defeats the whole purpose. Horror is supposed to be horrifying. It's supposed to be terrifying. It's supposed to get your heart pumping. It's supposed to make you feel anxious. It's supposed to make you feel stressed. It's supposed to make you feel very fucked up. But the thing is, that does not work with family-friendly, because how are you supposed to make that family-friendly? You can't. That's the problem. So you either have to lie and say it's family friendly, but it's horror and terrifying. You're going to have angry parents coming at you, or you're going to have to tone down the game, not make it terrifying, and to make it so that kids can play it, which unfortunately Security Breach did the latter, and that's the piece of shit game that we have. FNAF in no way, shape, and form should ever have been made to gear towards the children audience. It just does not make sense. This is a mistake that a lot of franchises tend to do, is that they see that children appeal to the franchise for a specific reason, and they captivate on that rather than focusing on what they originally had. FNAF is a masterpiece in how it's told. Unfortunately, children kind of latched on to FNAF because the animatronics were very appealing to them. And rather than staying on course with FNAF and focusing on the story and, you know, pushing the kids aside, because the kids are gonna like what kids like, whether you like it or not. But rather than doing that, they did the same mistake that pretty much a lot of franchises, movies alike do, which is that they focus on the children's side of the fan base as if they are the main focus. Kids, for a horror franchise, should never be the main focus, especially when you have a horror franchise that is centered around the death and the murder of children. I'm sorry, no. Also, this game overall is just not terrifying in general. There's a couple, I guess, creepy aspects. You have Moondrop, you got, who else you had? The endoskeletons. That's pretty much it. You don't really got much else but that. And that is kind of ruined by situations that can easily be solved. You know, Moondrop sometimes gets glitched out. Broken game, you don't really get to feel the fear there. Same thing with the Roxy, same thing with Burn Trap. The game just kind of glitches out during those sections. Then you have the endoskeletons, which seems like it could be the best part of the game, which is the red light, green light stuff. But all you have to do is just go inside of Freddy and just walk past them. So it just kind of diminishes the whole purpose of the red light, green light stuff. So you don't really get a chance to feel afraid. And it's not like you would be afraid anyway, because they just really hacked this game. They got rid of a lot of things for like bait. It seems too babyish. Like, you got rid of a knife, you got rid of words describing kill, death, murder, and blood. Like, come on, that's fucking ridiculous. Even for this franchise, like, that's way too far into the kid pool, and I'm just totally out of it. This game is not scary, but it does have a lot more creepy factors than Ultimate Custom Night, which is why it has the leverage. Taking 6th place, which is quite a surprise for me, is going to be FNAF 2. Now, FNAF 2, don't get me wrong, there is still a lot of creepy aspects to FNAF 2. The siren ambience, of course, that blaring siren that you don't know what the hell that is. That's supposed to alert danger. You have the toy animatronics at first being very creepy, specifically Toy Bonnie and Toy Chica having her beak removed, Toy Bonnie doing the whole screen roll across the screen, looking at you type of thing. And the withered animatronics look absolutely terrifying, and you don't want to be around them in real life. Unfortunately, you know, as the game goes on, the fast-paced motion and the more intense gameplay kind of diminishes the horror over time, which in this game specifically I don't really have a problem with, because that is the purpose of what I think a FNAF game should be. It should be scary and horror at first, and then it should get more action-like, and you should be able to, you know, as it gets harder, you have to be able to be more immersed and try to win, succeed, which is what a FNAF game succeeds at doing. So I don't really have a problem in that regards, but since this is a horror ranking list, I have to admit that FNAF 2 on a horror spectrum does lose its charm over time. But it's not to say that it's not still scary. There are many scary factors. I mean, Mangle is still a creepy motherfucker. The Marionette is still creepy. You have the death mini games, which are all, you know, the sound that plays and the structure of the mini game, how you move is so like disjointed, broken, and then of course you have a jump scare at the end. And then obviously you also have that cutscene in the opening and during the nights where you see the animatronics by you, and you have this creepy like space-like ambience with this weird like bird chirping metallic sound, like it's very creepy in how it portrays that perspective and that POV of just looking around, just seeing these things staring at you or slowly turning your way as the nights progress, which I think was really well done. So it is still creepy in those aspects, but obviously over time you get used to things. But I think for newcomers, if they were to play the game for the first time, they would still be creeped out. I mean, we were all creeped out when we first played the game. There's no denying that. Overall, still a creepy game. It's just you're comparing to the other FNAF games, which have a lot more fear to them, such as FNAF 3, which is taking 5th place of this list. FNAF 3 is kind of the game that gets bashed a lot, that kind of gets hit in the face a lot just because it can. FNAF 3 is criminally underrated for a lot of reasons, and there's a video somebody made, I think it's called The Pinnacle of Fear. FNAF 3 is The Pinnacle of Fear or something like that, where he perfectly describes the fear and the atmosphere of FNAF 3. Now, a lot of people had a problem with this game because of its jump scare, which in my eyes makes no sense whatsoever, because the fear of the FNAF games was never about the jump scare. It was about the build up to a jump scare, which is what makes horror in general, which is what builds fear. The anticipation of something happening, of something terrifying, something scary, the build up of ambition. What's about to happen? Is it going to happen now? Is it going to happen soon? That build up is what makes the fear. The jump scare is just the climax. You know, if I have to make a comparison, some of the kids don't want to hear this. When you're masturbating and you're feeling pleasurable and you reach a climax, the build up to the climax is a lot more pleasurable than the actual climax in and of itself. But obviously, you know, if you build up and you have a good climax, then that makes it perfect overall. TMI, but you know, this channel's not for kids. But then you also have Springtrap, which overall, minus the jump scare, Springtrap is probably the most terrifying thing to come out of this whole franchise. And to me personally, on a personal level, this is a little biased, but who cares? He is the only fictional character that has ever genuinely terrified the shit out of me in my nightmares. I've had a lot of nightmares in my life, and some of my own personal created mind things have terrified me. Like, I think I remember only one specific nightmare that just haunted me. But Springtrap, out of all, like, you list all the horror movies. You got Freddy, Jason, Michael Myers, all those mugs. You got all the horror games, Resident Evil, all that shit. Nothing has genuinely terrified me like Springtrap in my nightmares. There's nothing that's ever come close. Even like stuff like Zombie Apocalypse or The Thing infecting people and the anxiety that I get from that in dreams. Nothing was ever as immersive as something like Springtrap, because Springtrap is a concept that is so perfectly well crafted and well made. It makes it so terrifying to just think about. It is the concept. Sometimes it's best left to just leave the mind to interpret what it is, rather than actually explaining it. And Springtrap is kind of one of the best examples of that, because whilst the game does tell you what Springtrap is, it doesn't directly say it. It doesn't, like, it shows you certain things, but it doesn't directly say how it functions. Like, it doesn't say if Springtrap is Spring Bonnie rolling around that's possessed by the purple guy, or if the purple guy is still alive and in control, and he's just really brutally bashed and murdered, and he's trying to kill you. Like, that anticipation and fear is what makes this game so intriguing. It leaves the mind to wander and linger in various different thoughts of, like, what is this thing? How does it function? When I make the audio lore, is that the animatronic going to the voices in the other room, just like the previous game? Or is that the killer looking for a child to murder? That's the type of shit that makes this game very scary. And it's unfortunate that with the complaints that were made about this game, that over time people kind of like jumped on the bandwagon and be like, oh, this game is not scary, even though I do think there is still scary elements. Unfortunately, you know, the game is also a lot more simpler than a lot of the other games, but I'll get more into that on that ranking of the gameplay. But for right now, it's going to land dead center of the list. Is this the dead center of the list? I genuinely have no idea. Taking 4th place on this list is going to be FNAF's sister location. Now, I'm going to say it right off the bat right now so that you can prepare yourself for the later lists. I don't like Sister Location. I think it's one of the worst games in the franchise. It's definitely very weak in terms of a lot of things, but if there's one credit that I do have to give it, is that it does have a lot of scary, terrifying moments, including the cross the rooms and having to manage both your hearing and your sight, being able to spot Funtime Foxy so that way you don't move at the wrong time, or being able to hear Ballora so that way you don't move at the wrong time. And then you have the Funtime Freddy little parts and service room where you have to start fixing stuff manually, and if you fuck up, then Funtime Freddy's going to be right there in front of your face. And you know, the way he moves, he could jump scare you at any point in time. It could be very quickly, it could be a little slower, you don't know, which is really great for the horror. And then you have Night 5, which is a really well crafted horror scenario. Night 5, you know, starts off with death and the murder of these 2 technicians, where you just kind of see them hanging there in the spotlight view of the windows, and then you go and you fix up Circus Baby, you know something's just wrong. The entire time while you're doing it, you know something is just lurking around, hiding in the background, waiting to kill you, right? Waiting to slaughter you, but you just don't know when or if it's going to jump out. If you fail, you don't know. And that ambition leads to the night 5 of fighting Ennard, which Ennard is a very difficult boss battle that you have to like be very like intelligent and strategize how you're going to beat him and how to utilize your oxygen and your power perfectly, because this boy drains your shit very quickly if you're not careful. Unfortunately, the other half of Sister Location is not as scary. Like the custom night is not as intense or immersive or scary and creepy as the other FNAF games, specifically the other custom nights of FNAF games. Circus Baby doesn't really appear at all in this game except for one spot, and she has this one villain monologue in night 4, which kind of leads you to expect that she's going to be a villain in night 5. So, you know, even that is not as creepy. You kind of expected that already. The Biddy Bab thing, I'm not sure why people found that so creepy. You know, it looked really cheap to me. The whole metal plate thing looked really cheap and never made me afraid or creeped out. And there's a couple other things here and there that were not as creepy as people made it out to be, especially with the comedy. The comedy in this game is definitely the definition of hit or miss. You have some that definitely do hit. Like I'd say the angsty teen gag was pretty well done. Then you have the other comedy stuff that's supposed to relieve you during certain spots, but you don't really feel relieved at all. It just kind of feels like an annoyance and a nuance. But also because it's in running contender with the next 3 games, which are a lot more terrifying to me. Starting at 3rd place is going to be FNAF 1. People may say that FNAF 1 is easily the scariest. To me, I do think it is a very scary game still. I don't think it's the scariest anymore though. I do think that FNAF 1 has a lot of elements to it that still makes it scary, given the fact that the first thing that makes it scary is that it is definitely the most realistic FNAF game out of all of them. It's definitely the most grounded. It feels like you're actually there. The setting and how it's lit up and how it feels and how the restaurant looks definitely feels a lot more realistic than some of the other FNAF games per se. And the animatronics definitely look a lot more realistic and genuinely like creepy in a real way, because you could actually see the animatronics like this, like that you could see them looking like that. You could see them having the fur, like the real kind of like fur texture on them. You could see them having the creepy essence of staring at the camera with the dark eyes. Genuinely, from the lighting, can be terrifying. What made this game popular to begin with was the realistic scenario, which is what makes a lot of things popular, is how realistic it is. You know, the more realistic it is, the more people can relate to it, and which will, of course, in time make more people, you know, go towards it and like it more. Where it flaws for me is that obviously similar to how FNAF 2 gets over time. As it gets harder, it gets less scary. FNAF 1 has the same thing, but of course in my eyes that's a benefit. I don't see that as a detriment whatsoever. I do think that's very good overall, and I do think it still has a lot of creepy elements to it. Like Freddy and Foxy are easily terrifying. Bonnie is terrifying. I like this really cool mechanic about Bonnie, which a lot of people don't know about, that he is slightly different than Chica, where Chica, whenever she appears on your right hall, whether it be in FNAF 1, 2, or 4, she's always making noise. You'll hear her footsteps, you'll hear like the vent banging before she comes and gets you or appears there, and you'll always expect it. But Bonnie is like this silent mover, where he kind of silently just appears there and you don't know he's there because he moves so quietly and you don't hear him. And so when he's there, you're genuinely like shocked. Oh shit, Bonnie's here? What the hell? Whereas Chica, you know, Chica's this noisy, rowdy little chicken, and so you'll hear her when she appears. I like that little difference in their characters and the mechanics too, and how that helps you figure out how they function. And it makes Bonnie overall creepier because you don't hear Bonnie coming.
And that's not a joke for the internet to enjoy.
Taking 2nd place is going to be Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator. Now, this may be a weird position to put this game in, because half of this game definitely doesn't seem that scary at all. Half of this game actually seems like a very fun, lighthearted game. But it is the quiet before the storm that really makes this game appealing, is that whilst half of this game seems very fun and playful and colorful, the other half is dark, very terrifying and very well executed, which I really like about this game. Whether it be the interview-like scenario where you have to check the animatronics and see if they're going to move, which they can move at any fucking time, including on phase 2, or while you're staring at them, they could just jump over the table and get you. Even while you don't have to just look at the sheet of paper. They could jump scare you at any point in time. I really like that. Or whether it be in the actual office. And I really like this new mechanic and gameplay to Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator that requires you to have to finish your tasks. You don't have a time limit anymore. You don't have to run the clock for these animatronics. You have to complete a task and you have unlimited time. Unfortunately, you also have unlimited time to be able to get killed. So it's a really nice feature and a new breath of fresh air to this franchise that really helps out. What diminishes the scare factor just a little bit for me is that the characters talk, which to me that always kind of like ruined it a little bit, because I like it when they're silent and they're quiet and they're sneaking up to you, but when you hear them coming and you hear them saying these cheesy, cliche kind of one-liners, especially after they kill you and they just give you a one-liner, like that's not scary, it's just kind of goofy almost, especially with how they did Scrapyard's design. I mean, we have some character designs that are very scary, and then you have Scrapyard, which I don't know why you would change him so drastically like that, Scott. Honestly, I still want to imagine what a much more decayed version of Springtrap would have looked like, because that would have been absolutely badass. It's similar to how like Jason in part 7 of Friday the 13th, you know how he looked all decayed and corpsed and his shit, where you saw his like bones and skeleton. I really like that. I wish they did that for this game. But it is what it is. It definitely still has the fear factor when doing the game, when playing the game. You don't know if they're going to jump at you, which I really like. Unfortunately, I think one game does it better, and this game is actually kind of controversial to be in the first place spot, which is kind of surprising, and that is FNAF 4. To a lot of people, Five Nights at Freddy's 4 is a little too exaggerative, because the animatronic designs are supposed to be scary in the mind of a child. They got big sharp teeth, they got long claws, they may have tentacles or something, you know, multiple eyes, multiple limbs. You know how people view scary things, you know, if you have multiple or something abnormal like that. But on a gameplay standpoint, this game is genuinely terrifying. And to me personally, it is the most terrifying game I've ever played. Not Outlast, not Amnesia, not Resident Evil, nothing else, honestly. Slenderman, nothing. This game right here is the most terrifying game I've ever played, and it still is terrifying to this day because it requires so much out of you. It requires so much immersion, so much energy, that failing is kind of like a penalty. It's like you're in hell and you're being punished, which is what Ultimate Custom Night should have felt like, but it is what it is. FNAF 4, every action you make is a necessity, and that's what I liked about the FNAF games, is that every action you make is a necessity. FNAF 4, every time you go up to a door, you are staring into pitch black nothing, and you have to press the flashlight, because if you don't press the flashlight, then they'll come in your room and get you, which is really nice because you have to listen, and if you listen incorrectly, you're either blaring your ears out or your heart's gonna bust out of your chest and you're done for. And I really like that. On a horror standpoint, that's brilliant. Absolutely perfect masterpiece. And it functions so well because it requires you to do it the entire night for the entire game, which of course is obviously going to put it at the top spot in terms of a horror list. Now, what you're going to find out later on in another list is that because it's so terrifying, it's actually a detriment in a way. But I'll get more into detail for that in another video. But for right now, FNAF 4 to me is still easily the most terrifying FNAF game. So what do you think? How would you rank the FNAF games based off of fear, horror, and how terrified you were playing the game, or maybe watching the game? Because I know a lot of people don't actually play the games, which you really should, because to really experience the FNAF games, you have to play it yourself and really be immersed in there. Because it's easy to watch somebody play it and just kind of see their reaction of getting scared, but once you're there, you'll feel their pain. Trust me. Overall, that's pretty much all I gotta say. I leave it there to you bitch ass motherfuckers.